RX. This is Rob Kitty. And
Sandra Hamilton.
all right. So for today, I think was it 2 weeks ago we did our last one on what was our last topic about?
Essentially, it was the difference between men and women in their training and what they should focus on. Typically, we were talking about women need to focus more on strength, typically, and men just actually need to focus more on either an endurance or intensity aspect, I would say.
Okay, so that kind of loops in pretty well to the next one. I think so. Today's general topic is going to be on volume. Basically, how much you should be doing. Are you doing too much? Are you doing too little? Are you doing the wrong volume? I think those are probably the three main areas that we're going to cover. Firstly, this is actually probably one of the things that we most disagree on, of our different philosophies. I think there's some room between our beliefs on this one.
Yeah.
Versus some other topics where we're almost on complete alignment. So I find it's always more fun to talk about the stuff you disagree about than the stuff you agree about anyways.
I think it really comes down to the athlete on how they can handle volume.
Yeah.
So I think that's the difference. I handle volume very, very well. Rob does not. He breaks down and his body falls apart.
This is true. Yeah. So obviously everything that we say from here on, there's that, it goes with the overlying statement of it depends on the athlete. There are obviously exceptions to the rules. We're going to be doing our best to talk about the overall grouping of different people. So we may separate this to somebody that's been doing CrossFit for 9 months versus someone that's been doing CrossFit for 9 years are obviously very different. But within those 9-year people, there's certain people respond differently. We're talking about more overwhelming differences and things that we've noticed that are more common mistakes that people make. So yeah, I think it's a good area to start with you personally. Is you do, compared to a regular person anyways, before we get into any other competition, you do what would seem like an absurd amount of volume, I think.
Yeah, and I would say that's still not even close to the amount some of the games athletes are doing.
Yeah.
I don't have a full-time schedule where I can train full-time.
Yeah.
Which, if I did, it'd be another story. I'd be even more training more, probably.
Yeah. And so this is you are, how many months pregnant are you right now?
I am 4 months pregnant, so I'm 17 weeks. I'm almost halfway.
Okay. So to put this in perspective, I think this need to be said. She just said I don't train that much compared to other athletes. She is also, so she is not someone that does this full time. She has another job. CrossFit costs you money. It does not make you money.
No.
You're still pretty squarely in that camp. I'm sure there's maybe a point where it's a net zero, and then there's people who actually make money from it.
Yeah.
So you're still in the CrossFit costs me money, but gives me life experience, satisfaction, an outlet, whatever you want to call it. And you still just said, I don't train as much as a lot of other people. And so let's talk about an average week. And we're talking 4 months pregnant, Sandra,
right
now,
yeah.
with no comps coming up. This is just
I have a comp tomorrow.
Okay. So this is news to me.
I have to do this comp. It's online. Don't worry, the movements. There's the most aggressive movement is handstand push-up, and I feel very confident in handstand push-ups. I've actually been working on them since our last week. So, so typical week for me right now. Monday is a big lifting day. Takes me about 2 hours just to get through my strength portion. And that's with rest. And strength portion, that also includes my accessory work there. And then I typically have a pretty aggressive WOD on Monday, which is about 30 minutes long. It's interval style repeats.
Okay.
And then Tuesdays I'm here at the gym, and I train twice on those days. So I do my full day of Tuesday training, which is typically snatching, a WOD, accessory work. And then in the afternoon, I do my running program because I like to run on the True Form. Just right now, I find running, if it's really hot out, depending on the day and there's a lot of sun, I get really hot fast. Not that my cardio is bad, it's just I get really hot, and I find that's one of the things with pregnancy that's holding me back. Wednesdays.
So sorry, Tuesdays we're looking at around what? How long are each session?
The morning session's an hour and a half, and then the afternoon session's about an hour.
Okay.
From start to finish. So 2.5, 3 hours of training that day. And that's about the same, I would say, 3 hours of training on Monday.
Okay, so we're at 5 hours Monday and Tuesday.
Wednesdays, I would say, are a little less. I think would say Wednesday's training, I max out at 2 hours. It's typically it has been lately more a deadlift day and a WOD day. I wouldn't say that's a day that I go crazy on my WODs. I approach my WODs which day am I going to go hard, which day am I going to whatever WOD. So Wednesdays are that. Thursdays have been like a free-for-all. If I have to make something up in the week, or if you come in and want to hit up a WOD, it's just a free-for-all. Like, I really don't have a program for Thursdays right now. It's just like, it is meant to be a rest day in my programming, but I like to use it to either do like a WOD that's something fun, just move. Or like, and we're not talking like I'm doing some crazy WOD, like I'm doing a WOD at like a class women's RX.
Okay.
Not like my programming women's RX.
Yeah.
Right? And then Fridays are another typical one day of one session of training I do, and then Saturdays can be 1 or 2 sessions. So Saturdays I meet you guys at the park.
Yeah.
We tend to do a longer WOD that day. I wouldn't I don't know, like the intensity's good though in them. Like we're pushing.
Yeah.
So the intensity's good. It's outside. They're a longer WOD, which actually I find benefits me right now. I find I'm better at a longer WOD than a shorter WOD right now, which typically I'm the opposite athlete. I'm really good at short WODs multiple times, but with the pregnancy, I find longer WODs easier because I can catch my breath, figure out what I want to do, and I can really strategize, which it's just like being smarter than the rest of people. And then like last Saturday I came back to the gym and then I did some strength, and then I got coped into doing another WOD with Chris.
Okay. So by my quick math on that, we're at about 10 hours a week. And again, this is like a pretty, like that's like almost all working time. So mostly, you know, like it's cool to hear what Sandra does, but it's kind of an idea of like, of a perspective of someone at close to the top level, not quite the top level, of you're looking at like 10 to maybe 12 hours a week, possibly bumping that up if, you know, you weren't pregnant and you were training for the games or something like that, or training for regionals or sanctionals or whatever it was.
And that doesn't include like my physio or my stretching.
Yeah,
that's just like strength, WOD, accessory program time. That's not even like the time for other stuff you have to account for.
Yeah. So one of the things I've noticed is people tend to see Sandra, they see what she does, and they're like, okay, Sandra does, you know, a lot of days she does 2 WODs and a strength session and maybe gymnastics or a running session or something. So their first perspective is like, well, I want to be like Sandra, I want to get as good as Sandra is, or head in that direction. Even if you're like, your goals are very different, you're like, well, this person's training a lot, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to train a lot, I'm going to add a lot of volume in. And that tends to, I find, be a mistake for a lot of people, especially people that have been doing CrossFit in that 2-year range. I think is when the mistake is kind of the most noticed. At the beginning, there's this nice window for most people, unless you come in and you happen to be like really fit, football, hockey, like really good bodybuilding background. Unless you come into it with something like that, you're so bad that you can't really do that much volume. Like you don't have the ability.
Or even if you do all this volume, it's probably more beneficial than a takeaway for you.
Yeah.
Really, like if you're that out of shape too, like if you're doing that much volume, it's probably somewhat beneficial for you at that time.
Yeah, and you look at like there's so many things that you can't do that are kind of like the harder volume, and I think there's like a difference on what kind of volume you're doing. And at the beginning, if you're, you know, say you're like a 180 pound guy and your max clean is like 165 pounds, like you're doing WODs with 95 pounds, like you're sure there's stress, but it's not like you're doing, you know, 1.5% of your body weight for cleans in a WOD. Like it's not the same toll on your body.
Yeah. It's not a central nervous system stretch, which people don't really know about. So like when you really tax your body, it's your central nervous system, it needs time to recover. And if it doesn't get that time, you actually get a lot more injuries. So like we take that into perspective. Like I know when my central nervous system is like, damn, you need a break. Like, and it really comes from like really high intensity WODs, but I find for myself, high intensity, heavy weight WODs.
Yeah. I think that's probably the case, because like one of the things for me is like if I see a heavy deadlift workout, that's like the clearest sign, like okay, this one is going to have like a pretty big impact on my CNS. I know one of like 2 ways of looking at it. One is the next day I'm not going to be as good, and then the other thing is if I see that's coming later in the week, I know if I'm tired going into that, it's going to have a much bigger percentage effect than on a more cardio-based WOD, where you're still going to be tired, you're going to notice a difference, but on a workout where it's like very high skill level, so say we take a workout and it's like, I don't know, 12, 9, 6 of heavy deadlifts, so like 315 deadlifts for guys, 270 or 225 for girls, and muscle ups. that's a workout where fresh versus fatigued are going to be drastically different scores for most people that deadlift is heavy on. And if I do it on a fresh day where I feel really good, it's like, okay, I'm going to push for unbroken. It's going to be a super short WOD. When I'm tired and beat up, like that deadlift gets so heavy, I'm just going to stand there looking at that bar. I'm going to looking up at the rings the whole time. So I think that's like one of the ways to look at it. And then the opposite is like after you do one of those really tough workouts, the next day you're still feeling it. So if you go in and try and do another hard one, you're almost always going to have a much worse score than what you're capable of.
Yeah, and that's why like I kind of work a 3-2 system. So 3 days of work, 1 day of rest, 2 days of work, 1 day of rest. And that's why like I would say my Wednesdays WODs are like I don't go as hard in them, and they're probably not as challenging as some of the stuff we do, or because we hit Monday, Tuesday so hard.
Yeah.
And then like Thursday again, as I typically do, typically it's a cardio day. So for me to be like fatigued, it's a different. The cardio is easy on the system. The cardio makes me feel good. So it's really like about approaching your planning with a system. But at the same time, when I do cardio, I got into this conversation with a member. I called them out last week, and she won't mind that I mentioned her, Ashley. So Ashley came in. She was just having a day where she was like, I just want to move, but yeah, I'm just gonna bike. And I was like, well, what are you biking? Like, what's the plan here? Like, how do you plan on getting a workout or a little bit fitter, or in general just getting a good sweat on, right? She's like, well, I was just gonna bike. I was like, that's not gonna do anything for you for 40 minutes. I'm like, you need to have. So I was like, this is what I want you to do. I want you to hit the bike hard at a certain percentage for 2 minutes of an RPM, and then take a minute of like rest or active recovery riding, and just keep repeating that. And like by the end, like she was sweating. She was like, yeah, that was the better choice. And it's like, yes, because your training had purpose here. You still got the volume in. You still didn't kill yourself that day. Like she still got what she eventually wanted out of it. But it's just being smarter about it. Because if she just spent 40 minutes on the bike, she should have just gone home.
Yeah.
Without like actually like approaching it with like some training purpose to it.
So I'm gonna use that example, and I'm gonna kind of like bring us back to a good base point. But I do think. So there are people where yeah, like you said, if you don't have a plan sitting on a bike for 40 minutes, there's two drastically different type of people. There's one person, A, that's going to sit there and they're going to not really do much. They're just going to pedal their legs, and they're going to burn some calories, and maybe it's okay, maybe it's not. Like it's for most people something's better than nothing. But when you're talking about actually training, it's not a super efficient time. And then there's other people where it's like, you give them like basically an active rest day, and they go in and they try and PR how many calories they can get on the bike in 40 minutes. It's like, dude, you were supposed to go slow. So you, even for those people, still need to give them a plan to follow, where it's like, this is the max thing. Like, I don't ever want to see you say you're on, the bike and be like, I don't want you ever above 900 calories per hour, but I want you to sit here for 25 minutes. So that's a simple thing. One, they're going to follow it really well because they're like, okay, I can't go above 900, because those people tend to be really good at listening. And they're not going to get stressed about how many calories they're getting. Because even for me, when I sit there, like, I'll sit there kind of like this, not sure, and then I'll see a number and be like, okay, I can get to 300. So then I'll start pushing, and all of a sudden it's like, this was a rest day. This was meant to be a rest recovery day, and I was supposed to feel better afterwards. But I do think we should push it back a tiny bit and go a little bit more to like what it all comes down to is goal setting. What are your goals? And is your training like aligning with that? So if you look at someone whose goals are to do really well in the open, so for me, I would say the open is my primary test. I think the open is a phenomenal way of testing fitness. Yep. If my goal for the next 6 months is to get my open score as good as possible, and I'm doing a crazy amount of volume, that doesn't make any sense. Versus someone whose goal is to go to the games, like they're already a games athlete, they're training for the games, which is 13 tests or 14 tests, something in that number, over 4 days. Like, that's a lot of volume you have to be prepared for. If your goal is the open, you're looking at one workout repeated. So you have 4 days to do a workout, you can do it twice.
Yeah, typically high intensity too.
Yeah. So if you're doing if you're doing 3 WODs a day, so like obviously we're both going to agree, volume comes at the cost of intensity.
Yeah.
You can push that to some degree, but if you don't, like, you still have to accept, okay, my best training is going to be when my volume's not super high, or not necessarily your best training, but your best individual WOD scores are going to be when your volume's not super high and your intensity is jacked right up. The longest open workout we've seen is 20 minutes long, maybe longer if you're kind of really out of shape and you haven't hit the cap. But I think 24 minutes is the longest ever open workout. But most of you are looking at like 7 to 15. That's intensity. That's going really hard. And if you're training to go hard 3 or 4 times a day, you're not going that hard anymore. I can assure you of that. And we do see a lot of people that I coach anyways, where I've had that conversation with them a bunch, where we do a workout, and sometimes I do it with them. I do a lot of class workouts at the gym, and I'm laid out. Yesterday we did one, and it was all holding a dumbbell, working around a box, so box step-ups with a dumbbell, devil press, and then burpee box jumps. And it was 10 minutes long with a 2-minute rest in the middle. So 5 minutes, 2 minutes rest, 5 minutes. I was on the ground for like 4 minutes afterwards, just like trying to get myself back up. 3 people went out and like went for a run or like grabbed some other weights and started doing something else.
Like right away.
Yeah, and I was just like, I could tell you didn't go hard enough. I'm looking at what you're doing and I could say like, you clearly didn't go hard enough because you feel fine right now. So for those people, it's like, look, it doesn't matter what you do after the timer goes on the open. It only matters what happens up until that end. So if you're someone that needs to work on that intensity aspect, you have to lower the volume to be able to still hit it hard, right?
Yeah, definitely. And there's people that would benefit from that. So it's just training, and like how I kind of get my intensity in with my training is like, again, as I kind of said, we do a lot of interval repeats. So it's like I do something like for maybe 5-10 minutes, hardcore high. I get a little break. I have to repeat it, and it's like I have to beat that score. Like that's just me. Like I'm always the type of person like I want to beat my previous score, and that's how we get a lot of volume in with getting the high intensity stuff in. So I don't do a lot of like 20 rounds for time of stuff.
Yeah.
Like or 10 rounds for time of stuff. Like I don't do a lot of stuff like that. It might be 10 rounds, but it might be with a break in it so I can go a higher intensity. And that does accumulate.
Yeah. And there is a point where you do need to kind of hit everything. And I think that as an athlete or as a coach, like really for programming, that's kind of the art of giving yourself like a sufficient minimal dosage of all the movements. And I do think like one of my criticisms of a lot of coaches when I see certain programs is like, you're hiding from intensity and you're just giving so much volume because you're so afraid that you're not prepped for something. But once you get to a certain level, it kind of all carries over. Like if I'm doing a heavy clean cycle, my snatch is going to get better, right? If I'm squatting heavy, all my lifts are going to go up, right? Like there's carryover there. You need to touch on it a little bit, but I'll see somebody's program and they're like cleaning super heavy one day, snatching super heavy one day. They've got split jerks another day. Then they've got 2 squat sessions, like a back squat and a front squat session, and they're still trying to hit like 6 wads a week. And they've got either a running or a rowing or a biking program. And that's not like, and then they're the ones that are like, oh, I got to work on my pistols. And it's like, okay, effectively at the end of the day, you need to be able to squat, hinge, push, pull, and do it all under a lot of aerobic stress.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's really the game we're playing here. And like everything helps itself out. So it's like just because you haven't done a lot of muscle ups in the last 2-3 weeks doesn't mean your muscle ups go to shit.
No, and like we go through that all the time.
Yeah.
Like we go through a program where I'm focused on like during the quarantine, it was bar muscle ups. We did a lot of bar muscle ups. Like twice a week I was on the bar doing bar muscle. I loved it though.
Yeah.
I got so good. And I was like, I haven't touched rings in like 8 weeks, but again, then we're back onto a ring cycle. So it does all come together. One thing is though, you have to get a coach you trust and follow that programming is one thing I can say. Like if you are going above and over what your coach is really programming you, and I'm not like, we're talking like, I've seen this from athletes where they're like, oh, I did my coach's programming and then I did the class wads and then I decided to do comp wad programming. And I'm like, so you're doing 3 people's programming. Like Rob will tell you, like I follow Invictus. I do nothing but Invictus except for like on the Thursday where I'm like, okay, maybe I'll jump into a class WOD so I can be part of the community and stuff. But I'm very much the person where like he'll be like, do this WOD with me. I'm like, no. Yeah. I'm like, I'm doing my Invictus training. Like, and because I have seen the benefits of my Invictus training over the years, and I very much trust the system.
Yeah. So I do think there's one thing that we definitely would agree on here is, and this goes back to your goals. the more you're prepping for something specific, the closer that date gets. And realistically, the better you are and the higher your aspirations are, the longer that prep cycle has to be. Like if you're like, I want to make the games and you're, 130th in Canada, like it's possible, but you're looking at a 3-year plan.
Yes.
If you're someone who's like, you know what, I came 700th in Canada last year in the Open and my goal is to come in the top 600 this year, like that's not a 3-year plan. That's like, okay, I want to slowly get better and then really dial it in leading up to the Open. So you need a lot less time. But whatever it is, when you're peaking for a competition, maybe it's just your members comp for 3 weeks. Like the biggest thing during those times is saying no to other stuff.
Yeah.
You during those times have to say, no, I know what I need to do. I know what I need to be training for. And if you don't, you're in trouble. But you should have a coach. You should have someone, at the very least, you should have a plan and stick to it. Whereas when I'm like right now, I'm not training for anything specific. We don't even know what the Open's going to be. So I'm much more likely now to say yes to a workout than I would be, and then be like, okay, yeah, you know what? It's a Friday, like maybe I worked out an hour ago, and then Sandra comes in, she's like, let's work out again. Like, sure, I'll just take tomorrow off, I'll work out with you. Versus, because I don't have a specific goal, like I'm just trying to be fit, have fun, all that stuff. So I think that's an area where we definitely agree is once you've got something specifically in mind, that's when you should be saying no to more volume that's not part of getting you specifically better at what you need to be getting better at.
We see a lot is like the week before comps, people, or the week like 2 weeks up to comps, like people like think they like need to do all this heavy lifting and stuff. It's like, no, like back off that stuff. Like just go cardio. Just hammer your cardio.
Yeah.
Like it's good for your body. You'll feel better. Like just focus on cardio, moving and stuff like that. Don't worry so much about a heavy barbell.
Yeah. The only other thing I would add into that too is I try and keep movement speed high. So for the week of, like say it's, a movement like burpees, maybe you know it's in the comp, maybe you don't know it's in the comp, but burpees come up a lot, burpees over bar, really common one. Instead of doing a lot of burpees, I try and do burpees at full comp speed, like at that speed that I need to hold. Instead of saying like, okay, I'm going to do 100 burpees, I'm going to do 3 sets of 15 burpees with a slightly bigger rest and just getting used to that time. Not necessarily a sprint because it's not a full 15, like because you never do that in comps either, but just moving at comp speed instead of just volume for volume's sake. And then you want to be lifting a little bit heavy the week before. Some people like a bigger rest, some people don't. Some people want to be moving the day before. Like I like to sweat the day before a comp if it's a 1-day comp. If not a lot, just get in, get on a road,
I'm the same. I like to
mobilize.
just get on the bike, do something, like just move a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not touch a barbell, not gymnastics or anything like that. Like it's just a cardio.
Yeah.
If anything. And it's not like a training purpose cardio. I'm not like out here being like, I gotta hit like 3 sets at like 10 cal at this and that. Like no, it's a very, maybe a couple spikes, but nothing like a super high spike.
All right. So what I'm gonna say. So I have a question for you now, and then I'll answer it afterwards. So what do you think? Because again, we're saying this as like coaches, but we've also done a bunch of stupid shit too.
Oh, 100%. Don't kid yourself. Like this took me how long to, and it took me how long to be able to do the volume I do.
Yeah.
I didn't just start on Invictus and was like, I'm doing all this volume. That did not happen. Rob will remember when Rob and I first met, it was like, oh Rob, you want to do like a 21-minute EMOM with me?
Yeah.
And like I couldn't survive. You did way better than me.
Briefly.
And then it was like by the end of the summer, I was like, oh, she's actually not. She's like getting her shit together. And then it was like the next year, I started adding on more volume from my programming, and then now I'm just so used to that volume that.
Yeah.
Like it's fine.
And again, your volume has to be appropriate to what your goals are, and you do eventually, like you say you want to make the games, you have to get up to that level, but you can't go right there. So my question for you is, what's the dumbest maybe trend or like not a specific time, but like a trend that you found yourself falling into where you're doing either too much, too little, the right kind of, like the wrong kind, like a big mistake when it comes to volume?
Oh yeah, so when I first started CrossFit and I lived in North Bay, I was teaching a lot of spin classes, so it'd be like, I'd be doing spin, and then be doing CrossFit, and then it'd be like going for a run, but there was like no purpose to, the spin is fine, but it was good training, but it'd be like the run had no purpose, like there was no like training mechanism to my run, or if we're talking like just even the WODs in general, were just very basic cardio, like WODs. It just wasn't at the gym and I didn't have programming and I didn't know, and then I ended up moving down south and, you know, like I jumped into other programming, which was like pretty much purely weightlifting, which is why I got so good at it for this one gym. They just really like to lift. And then it was like I lacked on the cardio because I didn't really have structure there, and my gymnastics. And then it really wasn't until I came to Christine Athletics and then got on their programming with Invictus that like everything was together and like it made sense for me. So for me, it was just kind of like where I was at the time, and I didn't know better. And like I was one of the first people, like they're like, oh, you're so good up here, and it's like, oh, okay, but you don't know what to do. Like down here in the south, like in southern Ontario, it's like you come in a gym, you know, there's most likely to be someone better than you as an athlete. When I was in North Bay, I went to the gym, and it's like, oh, she can already clean and jerk more than everybody at the gym.
Yeah.
Like within the first week, and it's like, so there's no one to tell me what to do, and like how you should be trained. There's no one competitive, right?
Yeah.
And like I didn't know what, like I was going to be competitive. I didn't know this was going to be the path we went down. So. Yeah.
I think for me, the big, and we're generalizing here again, but I do think this is probably a mistake guys tend to make more than girls do. And I say that because the group that I made this mistake with a bunch was all guys.
Yeah.
And I think it was about a year into CrossFit, and there was a few of us, and we were all getting kind of good, and we would decide, like, you know, 1 watt a day wasn't enough. We need to add more stuff in.
Yeah.
And you know what? Sometimes there's some value in adding more stuff in, although nowadays I would never add it. Like, I would very rarely add an extra workout in, like a CrossFit style WOD. But back then, that's what our go-to thing was. We knew what CrossFit was, we knew the movements, and we always added the worst stuff. So we always added the super sexy stuff. So we would do, you know, whatever the class was, what the WOD was that day. So say, you know, maybe we did Helen, right? For example, so that's kettlebell swings, running, and pull-ups. And we're like, okay, cool, but like that one is just like more cardio-based. Let's do a fun one that's really hard. And then next thing you know, we'd like get together, there'd be 5 of us, and it'd be like, okay, we're gonna do like 5 rounds of 5 muscle ups, 10 strict handstand push-ups, and like 15 power cleans at 135. And the upside of it is you get way more used to like all these movements. You get so much more exposure. The downside is it just crushes your body. We were chicken winging muscle ups at the time. We could barely press out the handstand push-ups. The cleans, my clean max was 215, 220 back then, and I'm doing 135 and trying to touch and go with it. And it was just something where I look back on it, I was like, man, that was really stupid. Like, that stopped me from getting better in a lot of ways. Versus, and like, it was even like, I didn't even need to have a good plan. Like, I would start doing a WOD, or I'd get ready to do it, and then I would go up and talk to my coach. And at the time, it was very clear. He's like, what are you doing? And it's like, oh, it's a cardio kind of based WOD with some gymnastics. He's like, yeah, what are you good at? I'm like, I'm pretty good at gymnastics and cardio. He's like, well, you're an idiot. Like, go do something that's going to make you stronger. And then it was never like, don't go do 5x5 back squat after you've done a full lifting session and a workout. Maybe do 5x5 weighted pull-ups.
Yeah.
Something along those lines where you're still getting some smarter stuff in, but you're not crushing your body.
Yeah, and I think it just but I feel like that's just a general progression through CrossFit though. Like you first.
Agreed.
Like, you know what I mean? I feel like it's like, okay, he's his first year, like stupid. Like, you will tell people as much as you can. They're gonna take what they can, and then they come around to it. And you know what? Again, it's just a general progression. So I don't even really get like offended. Like, I don't really get offended or upset with people, like new members that do that. I really I'm like I might tell them, I might try to help them and stuff, but to be offended and be like, you're an idiot, like, I don't go that way. I'm like, hey, I did that too.
Yeah.
I can't really speak, like, that'd be pretty, like, hypocritical of me.
Yeah, and I fully agree that there's some mistakes that you just kind of, like, your own mistakes are your best teacher most of the time. The goal of a coach is just try and get you through those mistakes, or maybe make you avoid a couple.
And again, most people don't know that they want to maybe go be competitive or even go down, like, getting better at this sport until a little bit later, until 1 or 2 years then. And then they're like, oh, maybe I should get a coach now.
Yeah.
And they didn't really know this was where they were going, right? So it's hard to, like, invest in a coach when you don't know what you want.
Yeah.
Out of it yet.
So that's another, are there any other, like, big, either overtraining or undertraining like say volume amount mistakes that you kind of notice on other people, like especially more regular members, people that are just trying to work out.
We talked about that quite a bit last week, like what we see members do. So again, sometimes we see like I sometimes see it in a competitive athlete. Like there's a lot of girls who I would say are better athletes than me at CrossFit, but I think they're personally overtraining.
Yeah.
Like they're training more than me. When I see what they're doing, and I'm like, wow, they're really good. They're doing all this training, cool. And then like an open WOD comes, and I'm like, they're overtraining.
Yeah.
Like, they should be beating me on this stuff, and they're not because their intensity isn't there, and they're overtrained, and they're mental now about stuff, and they don't let their bodies rest enough to actually appropriately hit wide. So yeah, there's like actually girls that I think are way better athletes than me, and I'm just like, you're missing certain components in your life and certain training aspects to make you better.
Yeah.
And I think that's where there's a difference. Like for me, like why I'm so good at my training is because when I get to training, I have to focus on training. I don't have all day to be like, oh, I can train whenever I want. Like it's like, no, I have to go. I have this time frame.
And that is something that I've seen is almost like a complete skill set that gets better and better and better. Because so you could look at me and like I could be somewhat efficient. Like there's times when I'm more here for like one, I know that just because I'm at the gym trying to unwind doesn't mean I have to do WODs now. That was something that I learned for myself. It's like, you know what, you're here. Sometimes I'm just gonna like move really slowly for 20 minutes and talk to people and like stretch. And so that's maybe not like the super personality, like A-type personality that's driving through it, but that's also partly because I've realized, you know what, I'm doing this for a different reason, and like just because I'm at the gym doesn't mean I have to be working out. But like I have it when I'm trying to train hard, like I have a certain level and like an ability to move through different things, and like that's one level. And then you see, and it's better than most members. And then when I see you do it, you're better than me. You move through things faster, you recover quicker. And I remember being like, wow, man, like Sandra really gets through shit fast. And then I remember like Pat Vellner, who was second at the games, once or twice or whatever. And he was in here doing a training session, and I've never seen someone go through, like, get more into 2 hours of training than Pat did. It was, and he's the guy that's, like, got a reputation as being, like, a fairly, like, happy-go-lucky, casual guy. He was a nice guy, but he would literally be, like, setting up the next thing while he was doing his squats. So he'd, like, during his squat session, he'd be, like, you know, he's, like, taking his 3-minute rest, but he's also warming up his power cleans for the run.
And because he's time-bound.
Yeah.
He's the same thing. He was in school, and he had clinicals and all this other stuff, and it's, like, he is time bound, but he also has another purpose in his life, which makes him happy. So I really I think for a lot of people starting into CrossFit, like or wanting to get on the competitive side, I think it is beneficial to be a working person, because I think if your life becomes CrossFit so fast and that's all you think about, it can become a really mental stress issue. And you see a lot of people that are like, I can't do this anymore. I'm out. Like it's too much. Like I can't invest my time, and it's like. It's because something's missing.
Yeah.
Like they haven't found joy in the training, and that's an issue.
Yeah. Well, you spend such a small amount of time competing versus training that you do need to really enjoy the training, and you need to enjoy other aspects of it. Like for me, one of the big things is like there's just days where it's like they're not necessarily always planned, but you know there'll be like a few of the better athletes, like either coaches or members or whatever. And we're hanging out at the gym, and we decide to, like, you know, we're gonna train for a couple hours together, and it's like it gets competitive. Maybe you throw into teams. Like for me, like that's what I really love doing. I also really like I love competing in any fashion, and it goes down to like if I'm playing a board game with like kids, I'm still like as long as they understand the rules, like I want to win. So whenever I can find myself in a situation like that, it doesn't have to be this like big spectacle of stuff. But I love finding ways to compete, and I know, again, with that training volume, I got to pull that back sometimes and limit it. But again, like that's just for me. I just want to throw down with my friends and, you know, talk trash, like shit talk people, you know, get them going, see what happens.
Yeah, and like I think people just thought like I sometimes did this just to be competitive, and it's like you realize now, like looking at me, it's like no, like Sandra's been training just for a year, training hard just because she just loves training. Like it's like, oh, she just really likes doing this stuff. Like there's no like other than I just really like it. Yeah. Like I didn't have to train hard last year. I was trying to get pregnant for a year, and like I didn't have to like train as hard. I just enjoy the process. I enjoy warm-ups. I enjoy it all. Like that's the thing. Like I'm not like, oh, like I won't do the warm-up. Like
yeah. You don't seem to also get the, like, you like winning and dislike losing to some degree, but I don't think it's the same as some other people. Like, even me, like, it really irritates me. Like, I hate losing. I hate losing to Sandra all the time, especially when it's, like, something I know I can win, and it drives me freaking crazy, and it's made me probably a somewhat decent athlete to, like, make up for it. But, yeah, you just seem to love being here training, like, you know, even by yourself. Like, I don't train alone almost, like, during COVID was kind of the first for me training by myself. And I did not, like, I was just thinking about, like, okay, you gotta stay in shape, so when we get back to the gym, you could throw down with your friends and you haven't missed a beat, and maybe you start beating people that, like, missed out. But during that, I was always thinking about, like, wait till you get back around other people, whereas you were just like, I was talking to you, and you're like, this is great, I got the whole day to train, like, I'm working out so much, and I was like, but what, like, for me, it's like, there's no competition to train for.
Really, like, how's your intensity? I'm like, I'm smashing it.
Yeah.
Like, coach was, they were happy with me. Like, I get into my own, I fight myself. Like, I'm the person where I post a score and I'm like, I gotta beat that now for the next 5 rounds. And I want to get faster every 5 rounds. And, like, I go into dark places and I like that. I like doing that stuff, and I don't care I can sometimes get frustrated when I lose, sure, but, I'm the type of person that does really well from, like, what mistakes did I do in that WOD, what can I improve on, or I'm really positive person, so I see a lot of, like, growth in my stuff. So I might lose to Chris in a WOD, but I'll be like, man, I only lost him by, like, 15 seconds. I'm like, that's like a running workout, 30 minutes long. I'm like, I've pretty much won. Like, I'm very good at seeing the growth in myself. And I think that's where people can be very negative on themselves, and I try to look at more, did I get better in this in some way? And again, like, for you to hold on to a workout and be so angry that, like, you don't sleep at night and now it's affecting your mental state, again, those are the athletes that don't survive CrossFit.
Yeah, or win the games. They seem to go one of two ways. They seem to either be the Matt Frasers of the world or the people you've never heard of because they didn't make it past, 6 months of CrossFit.
Yeah, it's just like, you can't, like, there's times, like, I've heard of this, like, early on, like, people are like, yeah, I used to coach this athlete. She sometimes would redo the WOD 3 times a day because she wasn't happy with her score.
Yeah.
Why? Why are you doing that to yourself? Like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Like, that seems, well, one, to me, it just jumps out. There's really no one that should be able to do better the second time that day. Like,
no.
You definitely, and it's like, there are probably people that are training too much, so they don't know what that, like, real intensity feels like anymore. And I do think that was kind of one of the main things we wanted to talk about over this, even though, like always, we got super derailed, is you need to be able to keep that intensity. And yeah, like, obviously, when you're done, like, redoing stuff is not super necessary. The WODs are similar enough to again, we're going back, you're squatting, you're hinging, you're pushing, you're pulling, you're running, like, and you're doing it all while you're super tired.
By this time in, I've done so many WODs that are so similar.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I should be around this time frame. This is how it should feel.
Yeah.
Like,
there are times where every once in a while where a WOD comes along and I'm just like, man, that did not feel how I expected it to feel. But it's not very often. Like, I can think of, like,
the only one I can think of is the one against Phil, where we did all those muscle ups. It was a 2-part WOD.
Oh.
We did a WOD. We had to go into a second WOD.
Yeah, it started with 30 muscle ups at a time.
30 muscle ups and rowing and hand release push ups or something. And then, like, me and you were like, oh my god, Phil did like 10 muscle ups, and then, like, oh, the wall ball WOD was easy. We're like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Never split up wall balls so much in my life.
Yeah. Well, one of the ones that I find is another one was 20.1, the ground to overhead and bar over burpee with bar facing burpees.
Oh yeah.
So that one I really thought was gonna look a certain way, and there's so many, especially at the top level, people just, like, they don't really slow down on burpees. Like, there's a speed you go pretty hard, and I was like, they're gonna dummy this workout, and people were a mess. Like, it was so different because it's like, if you could see that workout for, like, it was 10 rounds, and I think 6 or 7 rounds is very close to a regular CrossFit WOD. And the same thing, like, I remember doing it and be like, it doesn't, like, 100 burpee over bar isn't that much volume. Like, I've done workouts that start with that.
Yeah.
And it was just so crushing. But again, my point is, like, most of the time, you know how a workout's gonna feel. You can look at it and be like, okay, the toes to bar is the main thing. Or there's, like, 20 muscle ups under pretty heavy fatigue later on. Like, that's probably gonna be the key to the workout. And the better person at muscle ups is gonna win that. So you don't need to be repeating WODs very often. And that is one of the weird ones where I do notice, like, the female clients that I have seem to be more likely to to repeat a workout that didn't go the way they wanted it to go.
Yeah.
And I will grant you, like I think one devastating mistake people do is they repeat workouts that are good for them. So it's like, it's a workout, say you're really good at toes to bar and handstand push-ups, and you've got a WOD with running, toes to bar, and handstand push-ups in it, and you come third out of your like little group of 10 people, and you're like, I should have won that, or maybe come second. So you repeat that one. Well, one time is great, you got to do it, everybody does all the workouts, but now you're repeating something, and you're building on your biggest strength already. Whereas if you are somebody that really needs to repeat workouts, do one that you came 10th out of your group of 10 or 9th out of your group of 10 that you sucked at. Like maybe if it's like heavy front squats and you're like, I'm bad at front squats, so okay, a week later I'm going to repeat that one and see if I can do better, because at least you're training your weaknesses, not just reinforcing the strengths for the top little margin that's available.
And I think that should probably bring us to the end here.
Yeah,
I think,
I'm pretty good
I
at
think we've done some good timing.
Mhm.
So again, this is Women RX. I'm Sandra Hamilton.
And this is Rob Katie.
Bye, guys.